Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
This is the FPL Draft Zone, your fantasy team's best signing of the season.
We are back, and just in time, as the Premier League title race hots up. Arsenal and Manchester City both lose as Liverpool move clear at the top. And there's a new manager in town, but what does Rúben Amorim's appointment mean for your Manchester United assets? Hello, and welcome to the FPL Draft Zone, a podcast all about Draft FPL. I'm Dom Crofts, I hope you are well, and we are back after a little mid-season break to bring you all the latest from another standout game week in Fantasy Draft. Coming up, we're going to take a look back at all the action from Game Week 10, and we're going to look ahead to Game Week 11 as well, taking into account all those waiver wants, all those ones to watch, and much, much more. But let's kick things off with a little reminder of everything that has happened this weekend with one match left to play, and it all started at St James's Park, where Arsenal's title hopes took a little bit of a hit with defeat to the Toon. Alexander Isak scored his third goal in as many games since returning from injury to give the Geordies a 1-0 win. Newcastle also kept their third clean sheet of the season and their first since Game Week 7, so well done to them. Then in the 3 o'clock kickoffs, Bournemouth went and beat Manchester City 2-1, Antoine Semenyo giving the hosts the lead, Evan Nielsen doubling that lead, and then Vardiol pulling one back for the champions, but it was not enough. They were beaten, and the title race took another twist just hours after Arsenal's loss. Meanwhile, at Portman Road, it finished Ipswich 1, Leicester 1, Jordan Ayew cancelling out Leif Davis's spectacular opener, and Liverpool took on Brighton for the second time in a week, and having beaten them in the Carabao Cup, they went and won again in the league. Kadioglu got the opener playing in a midfield role for Brighton, but Liverpool managed to turn it around thanks to goals from Gakpo and Salah, and it is advantage Liverpool in that title race. Nottingham Forest, well, they might be in a title race as well right now. They're third in the league. They beat a West Ham side who haven't got going under Julen Lopetegui. Chris Wood scored his 19th goal in 26 games since the appointment of Nuno Espirito Santo. Callum Hudson-Odoi was also on the score sheet in what turned out to be a very convincing 3-0 win that could have been a lot more. Southampton won 1-0 against Everton at St Mary's, with Adam Armstrong getting the only goal of the game from a Sugawara assist. And then in the early evening game on Saturday night, Wolves drew 2-2 with Crystal Palace. Chalobah and Gahey getting the goals for Palace, Gomez and Strand Larsen scoring for Wolves. On Sunday, Spurs and Aston Villa met in North London, and Unai Emery's side were well beaten. It finished 4-1 with Big Dom Solanke scoring twice. Morgan Rogers got on the scoresheet for Villa, as did Brennan Johnson and James Maddison for Spurs. And then at Old Trafford, Ruud van Nistelrooy took charge of his second game in a week following the sacking of Erik ten Hag, and United did okay, taking the lead through a Bruno Fernandes penalty before Moses Caicedo got an equaliser for Chelsea. That one ended 1 apiece. There is still one game left to play. That is a London derby at Craven Cottage between Fulham and Brentford, which takes place on Monday night. But that is the lay of the land as it stands. So let's crack on with a little bit of winners and losers.
The FPL Draft Zone. Winners and losers.
First up, let's talk winners, and we mentioned him earlier, but Alexander Isak's stock is rising again after he has returned from injury with a bang. Owners of the Swede have had to be very patient with him. He always seems to have a few injury-hit weeks during the course of the season, but he is back now, and he is firing on all cylinders. 3 goals in 3 games across all competitions, and Newcastle look like a different team with him in the side. And if history has taught us anything about Alexander Isak, it's that when he starts scoring, he tends not to stop. He scored 5 goals in 5 games on 3 separate occasions last season, and only 3 of the 30 goals that he got last campaign were not followed up the following match with another goal. So if you own Isak, you can expect more returns over the next few matches. He is the definition, the dictionary definition, of a streaky player. Antoine Semenyo is another player who is in fine form at the moment. His goal against Manchester City was his 5th return of the season and his 4th goal of the campaign. His overall play throughout this one at the Vitality Stadium was outrageous. He is playing with so much confidence right now, and Bournemouth's fixtures are actually very nice for the next few weeks. So if you have Semenyo, you can be pretty confident of more incoming points. And we're going to talk about a few other Cherries assets a little later in our waivers section, so stay tuned for that. As for losers, Arsenal's defensive assets are in a pretty bad moment right now. No clean sheets for 6 games and only 1 since Gameweek 2. The Gunners have been hit by injuries to their backline, and it is having a massive impact on their results and their title hopes. Ben White, Calafiori and Jurriën Timber have all struggled to play regular minutes. Saliba's missed a match through suspension. Thomas Partey has had to fill in as a right back. And until Arsenal can consistently get out a first-choice backline, there could well be a few more miserable matches in store for them. Next up, it's Chelsea away, and then they take on the might of Christopher Wood and Nottingham Forest at the Emirates. West Ham are other losers this week, not just players, the entire football club, who seem to be in total disarray. It was another bad week for them this weekend. Jared Bowen cut a bit of a frustrated figure for the Hammers. Kudus was absent again through suspension. Fulkrug remained on the sidelines with injury. And there was a red card for Alvarez. So if you own any of their assets, you are more than entitled to feel a little bummed out, especially with games against Arsenal and Newcastle to come. Lopetegui is surely next on the chopping block if West Ham's owners have any sense. So those are some winners and those are some losers. But who was the standout fantasy asset of Game Week 10? A player who went above and beyond to help you smash your draft league. It is time for this week's Fantasy Hero of the Week.
Hero of the Week.
And this week's Hero of the Week is Chris Wood, who scored again against West Ham to take his tally for the season to 8 goals in 10 games for Nottingham Forest. He has scored 19 goals in 26 games since the arrival of Nuno Espirito Santo. He appears to be on penalties for Forest as well, ahead of Morgan Gibbs-White. He is absolutely smashing his XG for the campaign, which stands at a lowly 4.4. And even though Forest have Newcastle, Arsenal and Manchester City in 3 of their next 4, the other game coming up is Ipswich Town at home, where you would imagine that Chris Wood will feast like it's Christmas ruddy day. He is freakishly tall. He is from a country more famous for hobbits than footballers. He is the ultimate journeyman footballer, but he is enjoying a sensational start to the season with goal after goal after goal after goal. So let's give it up for the man, the myth, the legend, Christopher Grant Wood, and prepare yourself for more tedious Have You Got Wood gags. It's our fantasy hero of the week. It's Chrissy, baby.
Hero of the Week.
Right, we are one game away from the end of Game Week 10, and then all attention will turn to Game Week 11. So to help you get set for that, we're going to talk waivers and ones to watch. But before we do, let's take a little look at the fixtures we all have to navigate in less than a week's time, starting at 3 o'clock this weekend with 4 fixtures. At the G-Tech, it's Brentford against Bournemouth. And Brentford have not actually lost at home to Bournemouth since both teams were in League One way back in 2005. Since then, Brentford have won 4 and drawn 5 against the Cherries. Last season, Solanke and Mbumo were among the scorers in what turned out to be a 2-2 draw. At Selhurst Park, it's a London derby between Crystal Palace and Fulham. Palace have shown signs of life recently. They won over Spurs in the league. They beat Villa in the Carabao Cup. But recent home fixtures against Fulham have not gone their way as much as they would have liked. 2 of the last 5 meetings have finished 0-0, including last season's game. The year before that, it finished 3-0 to Fulham with Tyrick Mitchell, one of 2 sendings off for Palace. And Palace's last win actually came back in 2019. At the London Stadium, it's West Ham against Everton. Dominic Calvert-Lewin got the only goal of the game in this one last season, but the year before that, Jared Bowen got both goals in a 2-0 win for the Hammers, and the East Londoners also won the season before that 2-1, with Bowen again amongst the goals. It's Wolves against Southampton at Molineux. Wolves have won all 5 of their most recent matches against the Saints by an aggregate score of 9-3. And then in the 5:30 game, it is Brighton against Manchester City. And City absolutely annihilated the Seagulls last year. 4-0 with Phil Foden scoring a brace. But they have dropped points there twice in their last 4 visits, losing 3-2 in 2021 and drawing in May 2023. Then there is a late kickoff on Saturday night between Liverpool and Aston Villa. Liverpool have not lost at home to Villa since 2014, so 10 years ago. And last season they beat them very comfortably 3-0 with goals from Salah, Szoboszlai and an own goal from Matty Cash. Villa did draw 2 seasons ago though, with Jacob Ramsey scoring for the visitors. Then on Sunday it's Manchester United against Leicester at Old Trafford in what would be Ruud van Nistelrooy's final game in charge of the club before Rúben Amorim's arrival. These two met in the League Cup just a week ago and United won 5-2. With Garnacho and Bruno Fernandes both on target. Their last league meeting at Old Trafford finished 3-0 to United back in February 2023, and that was a game where Marcus Rashford scored twice. Remember him. It's Nottingham Forest against Newcastle at the City Ground with Chris Wood taking on one of his former clubs. Newcastle won this game 3-2 last season with Bruno Guimaraes scoring twice, Fabian Schär on target, and Elanga and Hudson-Odoi both scoring for Forest. Newcastle also won the season before, with Alexander Isak scoring twice in a 2-1 win. Spurs take on Ipswich in North London. These two have not played each other in the top flight since way back in 2002, but for what it's worth, and I suspect it's not worth a lot, Ipswich have actually won the last 3 meetings. And then in the final game of the weekend, it is Chelsea, it is Arsenal, it is at Stamford Bridge, where Arsenal have not actually lost since 2018. Last season it finished 2-2, with Palmer, Rice, Trossard and Mudryk amongst the goals. Saka, Gabriel and Martinelli have all had good days at the Bridge over the last few seasons for the Gunners. So those are the fixtures, but who are the players that you and me and the other people playing this godforsaken game should be targeting on this week's waivers? Well, let's find out, shall we? It's time for Waiver Wants.
The FPL Draft Zone. Waiver Wants.
So as usual, we're going to go through potential waiver pickups in fixture order, and that means this week we are starting with Brentford against Bournemouth. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the game between Brentford and Fulham on Monday night, but assuming there are no injuries, Nathan Collins is a good 1 week punt for Brentford if you are in need of a defender. Not because they keep clean sheets. Oh no, they absolutely don't. But because Nathan Collins is a very real goal threat. He's got 4 returns in 10 matches so far, 1 goal and 3 assists, and all 4 of those returns have come at home. So he's got 4 returns in 5 games at the G-Tech. A defender, I mean, yeah. And Bournemouth have conceded in every game of the season so far, bar 1. Having said that, Bournemouth have looked very good themselves recently. They've beaten City. They've beaten Arsenal. Their confidence will be sky high. And one defender with a very high upside from them is Milos Kerkez. He got 2 assists against City, which has brought him to everyone's attention, but he bombs up and down that left-hand flank week in, week out, and he has a very good track record of impacting the final third even before he moved to the Premier League. At his previous club, AZ Alkmaar in the Eredivisie, he got 8 goals and 5 assists in 57 games, which roughly works out at an attacking return every 4 games or so. And although the Premier League is a lot harder, much tougher league than the Dutch top flight, he showed on Saturday that when he does get forward, he really can make a difference. And Bournemouth's next set of matches are actually very good. After Brentford, they have Brighton, Wolves, Ipswich and West Ham in 4 of their next 5. So if you've given up on the idea of clean sheets, and I wouldn't blame you if you have, and you want to invest in some attack-minded defenders, you could certainly do a lot worse than Milos Kerkez. A word as well, by the way, on Evan Nielsen, who scored at the weekend. I've had quite a lot of people getting in touch asking whether they should ship him out of their squads. The answer is, I really don't think you should. He is starting to find his stride in the Premier League. He's got 3 returns in his last 3 games. He's got 4 returns in his last 5 games. And I think he will actually end up one of the top 6 or 7 highest scoring forwards this season. So if you have him, I would hold on to him like grim death, unless you can trade up in a deal that sees you get someone like a Nicholas Jackson, a Kai Havertz, or an Ollie Watkins.
So, you want to be a marketer. It's easy. You just have to score a ton of leads and figure out a way to turn them all into customers. Plus, manage a dozen channels, write a million blogs, and launch 100 campaigns all at once. When that's done, simply make your socials go viral and bring in record profits. No sweat. Okay, fine. It's a lot of sweat. But with HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools, launching benchmark-breaking campaigns is easier than ever. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
On to Crystal Palace against Fulham, and like Brentford, we're basing our Fulham picks on previous game weeks rather than this game week. But if we assume that the likes of Jimenez, Emile Smith-Rowe and Robinson are already taken, I do think that Alex Iwobi is worth a pickup in larger leagues. He's actually only got 1 fewer point than Smith-Rowe going into that Monday match. He's also got more points than the likes of Anthony Gordon, Mitoma and Gabriel Martinelli. And after this Palace match, Fulham have a home game against Wolves. So there's another very good opportunity for points in that one. Now, just as a heads up, Iwobi is probably a short-term pick if you do decide to go for him, because after that Wolves game, it is Spurs, Brighton, Arsenal and Liverpool in Fulham's next 4 games. But still, for a couple of games, Alex Iwobi could be a solid pickup. As for Crystal Palace, defensively, they have started to look a little more solid recently, but their fixtures are tough, with Villa, Newcastle and City in 3 of their next 4. Having said that, as a long-term pickup, any of Chalobah, Lacroix or Guéhi could serve you well. Chalobah and Guéhi both got attacking returns against Wolves, and of course, if winger posing as a fullback Munoz is available, get him in ahead of all of them. Next up, it's West Ham against Everton, and West Ham are really poor right now, but like Manchester United, you would have to assume the board must be looking at Julian Lopetegui's position and considering his future. The Hammers are actually below United right now, down in 14th place, despite boasting some absolutely elite talent in their squad. They produced just 0.13 XG in that 3-0 defeat to Forest, and a reminder that Lopetegui's Wolves side also produced the lowest XG of any top-flight team while he was in charge at Molineux, which does not bode well going forward for West Ham or for their supporters who are having to pay to watch them week in, week out. They have won just 3 of their opening 10 league games, and those games were against newly promoted Ipswich and Manchester United in free fall, and that was only courtesy of a very questionable late penalty, and Crystal Palace way back in game week 2 when they were also struggling. So I would expect them to lose to Everton this weekend, and I would avoid Hammers players at all costs and maybe look at some Everton options. Ashley Young and Mikalenko offer a threat going forward, although Mikalenko had a bit of a stinker this weekend. And Keenan Tarkowski started again in that defeat to Southampton, but surely Branthwaite will return next week. I also would not let that defeat to the Saints put you off Toffee's defensive assets, because Southampton could easily have lost that match. Everton produced nearly 2 XG in that defeat, while restricting the Saints to just 0.54 XG. So against a clueless Hammers, I would actually be pretty confident that Everton can keep a clean sheet. As for their more attack-minded assets, Beto got nearly 30 minutes against Southampton, so if DCL is already taken, he could be worth a punt if you're in need of a third striker option. And Dwight McNeil returned from injury as well, so if any managers had already dropped him, he is well worth a waiver if you can get him. Wolves against Southampton at Molineux is a game I would fancy Wolves to win, and defensively, I quite like Craig Dawson for this one, a defender with an attacking upside. He's got 21 goals and 5 assists across the course of his Premier League career, and he tends to step up when his club needs him the most. And with Wolves where they are in the league right now, they really need him the most. Obviously, if one of Ait-Nouri or Semedo are available, they are higher priorities than Dawson, with Ait-Nouri the highest of all. But assuming most draft leagues will have one or both of those players already taken, Dawson is a solid alternative. Going forward, Strand Larson and Cunha will also probably be taken already, but Pablo Sarabia returned to the Wolves starting 11 against Crystal Palace, and he could easily have walked away with a few goals. He finished with an XGI of 0.41 from just an hour's action, which is not bad at all. And last season, in just over 1,700 minutes, he ended up with 4 goals and 7 assists. So in roughly 19 games worth of minutes, he returned 11 times. He was one of those players who was in and out of draft squads all the time last season, but you don't get much better than a home game against Southampton to kickstart your season. And after that, there are some very good games still to come for Wolves, including Everton, West Ham, Ipswich and Leicester in a row between game weeks 14 and 17. As for Southampton, I would not rush to get any of their players. Armstrong got the winner against Everton. Onuachu came off the bench and got a couple of minutes as well. But if I had to pick one, I would go with Aaron Ramsdale, who returned big with a clean sheet and 1 bonus point. And if Southampton do manage to keep clean sheets in the future, it will be in large part thanks to the former Arsenal man. It's Brighton against Manchester City at the Amex, and Kadioglu seems to have cemented a role for himself in the Brighton midfield. There was all sorts of speculation as to whether he would play at right back or left back. Turns out he's playing at neither. He played on the right-hand side ahead of Veltman against Liverpool, and he got a goal as well. Obviously, against City, he's going to suffer in terms of points if they do get trounced, and that is entirely possible. But going forward longer term, if Brighton can keep a clean sheet, he is going to be the pick of the options from their backline if they continue to play him in this more advanced midfield role. And Simon Adingra is also one to keep an eye on. He's had limited minutes so far, but he has looked really good whenever he has got on the pitch. He is really knocking on the door for me to get a place in Brighton's starting 11. And although those wing positions are extremely congested at Brighton, ridiculously so actually, if he does start, he's certainly got the potential to return. He's got 4 goals and an assist in 8 appearances so far this season, so the output will be there if the chances come his way. As for City, well, Pep Guardiola was complaining all about his lack of options before their defeat to Bournemouth. He said he couldn't drop Rico Lewis as there was no alternative, and then all of a sudden Rico Lewis is dropped and Kyle Walker returns to the starting 11 as captain. So if anyone took Pep at his word and dropped Walker, he could be worth a waiver, although City and clean sheets, as we've seen, do not seem to go hand in hand very often. Akanji also returned against the Cherries. Savio was on the bench, so similarly, if anyone drops any of them and they're free, they'd be nice pickups. And Jeremy Doku returned from the bench against Bournemouth and looked very good, so if he is available, he could be a decent bit of business too. Liverpool take on Aston Villa at Anfield, and there are actually some pretty good options this week from a Liverpool perspective. Ibrahima Konate got his inevitable injury and only managed 45 minutes against Brighton, but instead of Jarrell Quansah getting the nod in his place, it was actually Joe Gomez who came on. And Joe Gomez is very unlikely to be drafted in your league. So if the Konate news is bad and the injury is medium to long term, Gomez could be a lovely route into that Liverpool backline. And Curtis Jones is another strong option for Liverpool this week. He's had a decent impact in recent weeks with a goal and an assist in his last 3 league games. He didn't start against Brighton, so that is the risk. There is rotation all the time in that Liverpool midfield right now. But when he came on, he made a big difference again. And he has actually started 3 of their last 4 games. So if you are looking for a Liverpool midfielder with an end product, Jones is a good option, and he probably represents just as much of a goal threat going forward as either Szoboszlai or McAllister, who were both much more highly valued at the start of the season. As for Villa, Lucas Digne earned another start against Spurs. He has started every league game this season for Unai Emery's side, so if you want a route into their defence, he's the one for me, although it's not easy to support that this week against Liverpool off the back of a 4-1 defeat to Spurs. Having said that, Digne has got 3 assists already this season, and he's been in the bonus points 3 times as well. And Jacob Ramsey seems to have cemented a place in that Villa starting 11 for now. He's got 2 assists in the Premier League and a goal in the Champions League so far, so he's a nice option if you do want a piece of Villa's attacking pie. After Liverpool, it's Palace, Chelsea, Brentford and Southampton for Villa, so some very decent fixtures for him there if you fancy it. It's Manchester United against Leicester at Old Trafford, which is a good game for United at any time, but with the shadow of Rúben Amorim looming over the club, it is a game where you would imagine their players should be looking to send a big message to their new manager, and that can only be good news for us draft managers. And if you have any United assets, or there are any available on the waivers, now is the time to try and get them in, because aside from a likely new manager bounce, Almerim's record over the last few seasons has been outrageous. He guided Sporting to their first league title in 19 years back in 2021. He won it again last season, winning 29 of 34 games played. He tends to play a 3-4-3 or a 3-4-2-1 formation, and he is a manager who seems to pride himself on defensive solidity as well as attacking intensity. Sporting scored 96 goals last season compared to United's 57, and defensively they were excellent as well. They conceded the fewest shots of any team in the Primera Liga last season, and they limited their opponents to just 7.9 shots per game, which compares very favourably with the champions, Manchester City, who limited their opponents to just 7.7 shots per game. By comparison, Manchester United under Erik ten Hag conceded an average of 17.6 shots per game. So I would expect to see dramatic improvements at the back for United, and Diego Dalot would be my pick of the bunch from them in terms of their defenders. But if he persists with this 3 at the back system, which has served him so well in Portugal, any of De Ligt, Martinez, even Maguire might be a solid pickup to begin with Lenny Yoro an option when he returns to fitness, and Shaw as well. And you'd also expect Amorim to get the most out of his wingers, so Garnacho and a certain Marcus Rashford could be due a resurgence too. It will be interesting to see how he integrates Bruno Fernandes into that system. Ruud van Nistelrooy certainly seems to be getting the best out of him. If he does move to a 3-4-2-1 formation, Fernandes and Rashford behind Højlund could be the way they go. So any or all of these players are probably worth trying to bring in ahead of the new man's arrival, because I fully expect Manchester United to improve massively now that bald fraud Erik ten Hag has gone. Now, Amorim's first game is not actually until after the international break, so this match against Leicester will be another game under the stewardship of Ruud van Nistelrooy. But based on his first 2 games in charge, he's done okay. A win against Leicester in the Carabao Cup, a respectable draw against Chelsea in the Premier League. So who knows? Maybe United's resurgence starts now. Forest take on Newcastle, and there are lots of potential draft assets to choose from here. I would expect all of Forest's backline to be taken by now, but if they aren't, get them in. Moreno again proved his value in that win over West Ham. He would be my first pick from their backline. Morgan Gibbs-White returned from injury and managed 60 minutes against the Hammers, so if he's been dropped by a rival manager, he'd be a strong pickup. Elliot Anderson has done really well for Forest since signing for Newcastle. He's got 3 assists now following another assist against West Ham. As for Newcastle, they seem to be improving week on week out now, and defensively, They seem a much more solid unit than they were at the start of the season. Livramento and Hall were the standout performers against Arsenal, and I would be keen on either if they were free in my league. And similarly, Joe Willock is one to watch. He started against Arsenal. He had a couple of really good chances, could easily have walked away with a goal or two, and he has put those chances away in the past. So if you're lacking a fifth midfielder, he would be a decent pickup with games against West Ham, Brentford, Palace and Leicester in 4 of Newcastle's next 6 games. Spurs take on Ipswich in North London. Ipswich don't really interest me, surprise, surprise, but if you're in a really large league and you're desperate for a third striker option, there is George Hurst as a player worth keeping an eye on. Ogbene is ruled out for the season at Ipswich, so there is a chance that Liam Delap will switch to the right wing, which is where he played for Hull last season, and that could mean that Hurst becomes Ipswich's main striker. He was dropped to the bench for the game against his old club Leicester at the weekend, but the week before he scored and assisted against Brentford, so that's a situation just to keep an eye on. As for Spurs, Son's return this week means that Werner's run in the side is over, but with Mickey van der Ven currently injured, Dragosan is a defensive option. A clean sheet is more likely than not against Ipswich, you would think, but then it's City away, so Dragosan would be a short-term pickup if you can get him. And Romero also limped off against Aston Villa, so Ben Davies could be another option if you do want a bit of Spurs defensive action. And finally, it is Chelsea against Arsenal. Arsenal's recent form could mean a few changes over the next few weeks, and it will be interesting to see how they play and who they play when they take on Inter Milan in midweek in the Champions League. But given the lack of creativity in midfield against Newcastle, Ethan Nwaneri is a high upside gamble. Now, Martin Ødegaard is rumoured to be back for the Inter game, but even if he is, it's debatable whether he can play 2 games in a week. And Nwaneri has been very impressive when he has been given minutes. He will get minutes if Arsenal need a goal, and I think he would be a decent fifth midfield option in a larger league. He's not guaranteed to start. So far, Arteta has been reticent to start him, but things are getting desperate at the Emirates now. They need to start winning again. So Nwaneri, if Ødegaard is not fit, could be a solid pick. We'll have to keep an eye on what happens against Inter Milan. I also still do like Mikel Merino as an option, and long term I think he would be a good asset. He scored against Liverpool. He had the best chance of the game in that defeat to Bournemouth. He had a shot from close range blocked against Newcastle, which was their best chance of the game in that one. And he is a threat at set pieces. So he could very easily have 3 goals in 3 games for the Gunners so far, had luck been a little more on his side. And when Ødegaard is fit, he will slot in very nicely alongside the Norwegian, having played with him back when the two were at Real Sociedad. As for Chelsea, Jadon Sancho's future is being questioned again after Enzo Maresca said he'd been dropped from the previous 2 games due to tactical reasons, and Neto has done pretty well in his absence, so the very real risk of Maresca roulette is back again, and it's even affecting their backline with Gusto and Cucurella sharing minutes at left back. So outside of Madueke, Jackson and Palmer, I would say their attacking assets are probably a gamble too far, but defensively Wesley Fofana may have been dropped in your league after he missed that Liverpool game, and while Arsenal is not a great game from a defensive point of view for him, Chelsea's next game is away at Leicester, so Fofana could easily return in that fixture, as could Reece James or Colwell, who are all assured of starting if fit. As I say, he is not one for this week, but if you can pick Fofana up and hold him on the bench for 1 week, it may well pay dividends. Okay, that is it for this week. Game Week 11 starts on Saturday the 9th of November at 3 p.m. GMT. The deadline for your waivers is the day before, Friday the 8th of November at 1:30 p.m. GMT. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe to this pod. If you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star review is the only payment we ask. If you listen to us on Spotify, that payment is transferred to a nice review with some very pleasant words. That would be amazing. And of course, you can also follow us on social media. We're on X and on Instagram. Our handle on both is at FPL Draft Zone. It's easy to remember. It's the name of the show. But that is it for this week. Good luck ahead of Game Week 11 as draft leagues around the world hot up and the Premier League title race hots up too. Hopefully you will be celebrating a huge points haul when we meet up again next Sunday night. Until next time, it's bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.